I'm just going to ask Andy. Can you sit there, Andy?
Yeah, okay.
George has gone away. I'm just going to ask Andy Richards to start us off, but then there'll be plenty of space for more discussion. Andy.
Okay, thanks very much. Can you all hear me? I think, just to introduce myself, I'm Andy Richards. I'm the chair of Brighton and Hove branch of Unison, which organises workers mainly employed by the council, but also a host of voluntary sector employers as well. So we actually represent workers from a number of employers, and a lot of them are kind of affected indirectly by what's in the council budget. I think I'll start by saying, and I say this with due respect to all the Green comrades that I know in the room, I think the important thing to bear in mind here is that the People's Assembly needs to be about what's good for the people of the city, not necessarily what's good for the Green Party. Okay, I'll just throw that in, as I say, with respect, but just wanted to say it in view of the previous session. I actually, although I'm the chair of the branch, I'm not a full-time union person. I work for a living. I work in the council itself in a job, and I represent as a shop steward mainly staff working in revenues and benefits, which is the housing benefit, council tax, business rate collection part of the council. And just to give you a flavour of what's already happened, leaving aside what we've got coming up in this budget. In terms of what's happened because of cuts in benefits, we've got a situation where currently now the biggest single cause of health and safety reported incidents in that particular department, 75% of all reported health and safety incidents, is violence and aggression from service users to workers. I don't say that to make a moral judgment about that, but obviously as a trade union representative I have to be concerned about the health and safety of my members. And I think it speaks volumes for the kind of situation that people find themselves in, that now that's the primary cause of health and safety incidents within what you might expect to be a comparatively safe office working environment. And we've got a situation where members that I represent in that department are wanting training on how they counsel people who are threatening to harm themselves in the course of phone calls because of the situation they find themselves in with benefit cuts, with being pursued for various arrears, mainly council tax arrears. And we have a situation now where people, the poorest people in the city, are being chased for council tax because no longer does council tax benefit cover everybody's liability if they're on the lowest income. We've got a situation where the council's kind of acting like a sub-branch of Wonga, where it's adding more costs than the actual original debt onto bills that they can never hope to actually collect, but it's causing huge stresses and strains on people out there. Now, in terms of what's being proposed, I think Ben's kind of already set the scene in terms of what we're faced with, not just this year, but for the next 4 years, which is roughly £25 million per year. And we're already talking about how the city can possibly sustain it just for this coming year. I have to say, looking at what's being targeted in this budget, if you actually had the job of thinking how can we really hit the weakest people hardest, you couldn't have come up with anything better than this budget. You've got cuts affecting people with learning disabilities, as we've already heard. We've got cuts to subsidies for organisations like Able and Willing, which is a body that's supposed to help disabled people into work through providing them with work, and the future of that is in doubt if that subsidy is cut. We've got the possibility of the supported employment team effectively being abolished, which again is a body that's supposed to help disabled people into work and into sort of productive activity. And I find it ironic that in a situation where we've got a government saying more disabled people should be getting work, but at local authority level we're cutting back on those opportunities to make that a possibility. And it's like some kind of grotesque catch-22 that people are being caught in. And we kind of wonder why we're then faced with violence and aggression in council offices. We're talking about older people's resource centres, daycare centres being cut, shut down. There's a whole host of service restructures proposed in the budget for which we don't currently have any actual detail. We feel pretty sure it's nothing good, but we don't even know what's in some of those service restructures. We also know that the council is seriously considering privatising effectively care services through the setting up of a company to run care services. And to us in the unions, however you dress it up, that looks like privatisation to us. So in terms of what we're faced with, we've already got a situation where services have already been cut to the bone. There is no kind of fat to trim. There are no huge back offices staffed with people not doing very much anymore. If that ever existed, and I would contest whether it did, but if it ever existed, it certainly don't exist now. That's not an option. There's not an option to sort of trim some luxuries that we've got sitting there that aren't achieving very much. We're talking about real services and we're talking about effects on real people. And it seems, you know, what we need is an alliance. We need some kind of coming together of people who use services, people who are concerned about what's going on, and the trade unions, so a kind of community trade union alliance to try and fight back against this. And as Danny said at the beginning, it's fair to say that we are on the back foot. You know, we've been on the back foot for some time, and it's a question of what we're going to do to actually kind of break out of that. And I think one of the things we should be saying is that you've got a situation here where the people I just talked about who are going to be suffering from the worst of these cuts, I mean, you'll recognise these people that are going to be suffering from these cuts. You know, they're the people who didn't break the banks. They're the people who didn't take huge bonuses. They're the people who didn't make ridiculously unsustainable loans. They're the people who didn't set up private equity firms as a means of aggressive tax avoidance, as it's called. So the people who definitely did not cause the crisis are the people that are being expected to pay for it. And I think, you know, there's a lesson here, not just for political parties and political activists. There's a lesson here for trade unions, and I think it's fair to say that I think at the national level, trade unions need to do more than they have been doing. We've got a situation where they reckon that by the time of the general election, going back to the previous general election, in that time span, 1 million public sector jobs will have been lost, and to a large extent, you know, it has to be said. Having criticised you, I'm going to criticise myself now. The unions have stood by and watched quite a lot of that, with a few very noble exceptions, and it seems to me that the unions need to do more. We've got a policy in Unison locally. We have a policy, it's a long-standing one, which is that we would ballot for industrial action in the event of any compulsory redundancies, and it's a policy that we just reaffirmed at our last branch meeting. But I think we need to do more than that, because just opposing compulsory redundancies is okay, protecting our members who are immediately faced with the loss of their job. But the problem with that is that the cuts just fall then elsewhere. It falls on all those vacant posts that we're already carrying and which our members are already straining to cover in terms of trying to keep services going. So it seems to me that we need to widen our vision a little bit as well, rather than just this kind of ultra-defensive pose of just defending people who are immediately facing the loss of their job. So there's things that we need to do as well there. I think the other thing, and I'll kind of end on this because I don't want to go on too long, the other thing I think we need to remember is that there is both a national and an international dimension to this. There's a national dimension in the sense that all councils are going through this process. All councils are facing this. There was stuff on, I think it was Facebook the other day about Southampton, where huge cuts are being threatened in Southampton as well, which is just, you know, down the road. There are actually anti-cuts councillors in Southampton. There are 2 councillors there, 2, I think, former Labour councillors, it's fair to say. They usually are former Labour councillors, who have actually voted against cuts in Southampton. So it's not like Brighton Hove City Council is suffering this in isolation. And obviously the other point I wanted to make is that the austerity drive is across Europe and beyond. And, you know, there are people taking action in Greece, in Italy, in France, even in Portugal, even in Germany, which we're always told is this kind of beacon of affluence out there, but which it isn't really. You know, things are going on internationally as well, and we need to be part of that move. The People's Assembly needs to be part of that kind of movement as well. I think that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Andy. Does anyone who hasn't spoken yet speak? Okay, I've got these 3 people here. Yeah.
Yes, well, I certainly agree that the trade union movement should be imposing cuts, and particularly, obviously, when we have this particular instance where I think jobs are on the line, and I would certainly agree as a Green Party member that there should be some action taken if there's any compulsory redundancies. But I would just want to hope that everybody, and in terms of as Alex said about that we should be thinking about this as People's Assembly members, not just as Green Party members. Well, I think that everybody here should be not only asking or so demanding from their Green councillor, but also from Labour councillors that they refuse to vote for this budget, and I think that will make it more of a united approach. Certainly, I'm worried, and not only as a Green Party member, but also as a citizen of this town, about Caroline Lucas not being elected, because I think Caroline is a great, and as a trade unionist, because Caroline is a great supporter of the trade unions in this town, and as a person who is probably the most left-wing of all of the MPs in the whole of. And so, if we